August 12, 2094, 3:47 in the morning. A woman named Chen gives birth to a daughter. The baby cries. Sarah cries. Her partner cries. It's a moment as old as humanity itself. But it's also the last time it will ever happen. Sarah Chen's daughter is the last human being who will ever be born the way you were born, the way every single one of your ancestors was born, the way humans have been born for 300,000 years. Because from that moment forward, every child enters the world through glass. Artificial wombs didn't arrive with fanfare. There was no single moment where humanity decided to stop being born. It happened gradually, quietly. The technology had existed for decades by then, first developed for premature babies who couldn't survive outside the womb, then for women with medical conditions that made pregnancy dangerous or impossible. It saved lives, countless lives. But then something shifted. The technology improved, became safer than natural pregnancy. Zero risk of maternal mortality, no preeclampsia, no gestational diabetes, no complications, perfect nutrition delivered directly to the developing fetus, continuous monitoring, instant medical intervention if needed. By 2085, artificial wombs had a 99.97% success rate, natural pregnancy, 98.2%. And when something is safer, more convenient, and statistically superior, it doesn't stay optional for long. If the idea of a world where no one is born naturally anymore intrigues you or terrifies you, you're in the right place. This channel explores the futures we might create and what they cost us. The path to 2094 started with the best intentions. In 2040, Dr. Yuki Tanaka successfully gestated a premature infant in an artificial womb for the first time. The baby had been born at 22 weeks, far too early to survive. But in Dr. Tanaka's device, surrounded by synthetic amniotic fluid, fed through an artificial placenta, the baby lived. It was a miracle, a triumph of human ingenuity, and no one could have predicted where it would lead. For the next 2 decades, artificial wombs remained purely medical. Women with high-risk pregnancies, cancer patients who needed chemotherapy, accident victims. The technology was expensive, regulated, reserved for those who needed it. But in 2061, everything changed. A landmark study was published comparing outcomes between natural births and artificial gestation. The results were undeniable. Babies gestated artificially had lower rates of birth defects, better cognitive development markers, no exposure to maternal stress hormones, alcohol, or environmental toxins, and critically, zero maternal deaths. The medical establishment took notice. Insurance companies took notice, and parents started asking questions. By 2070, artificial wombs were no longer just for emergencies. They were available to anyone who could afford them, and the cost was dropping fast. Parents could choose, carry the baby themselves with all the risk, discomfort, and career interruption that entailed, or use an artificial womb. Visit the clinic weekly, watch the baby develop behind glass, and continue living their lives normally. At first, it was a choice. 2071, 23% chose artificial wombs. 2075, 47%. 2080, 68%. 2085, 84%. The shift happened faster than anyone expected. In corporate offices across the developed world, pregnancy became increasingly rare. Women who chose natural pregnancy found themselves facing uncomfortable questions in job interviews. Are you planning to take maternity leave? Became a question that didn't need asking because most women weren't planning to be pregnant at all. By 2087, major insurance companies began offering reduced premiums for families who chose artificial gestation. The logic was simple. Fewer complications meant lower costs. And in a world driven by data and efficiency, the numbers told a clear story. Natural pregnancy became something discussed in whispers, something your grandmother did, something that seemed almost primitive. There were resistors, of course. Religious groups argued that natural birth was sacred, ordained by God. Some feminist organizations claimed that removing pregnancy from women's bodies was erasing a fundamental aspect of female identity. Environmental groups worried about the energy consumption of millions of artificial wombs running continuously, but their voices grew quieter each year. Because it's hard to argue against saving lives, hard to argue against eliminating suffering, hard to argue against progress, when the alternative is going backward. By 2090, natural pregnancy had become unusual, something practiced only by the very religious, the very poor, or the very stubborn. Sarah Chen was all three. She was a Buddhist. She lived in a working-class neighborhood in Seattle, where artificial womb clinics were still considered a luxury, and she was, by her partner's own admission, the most stubborn person they'd ever met. When Sarah got pregnant in 2093, her friends were concerned. Her doctor was concerned. Even her own mother suggested she reconsider. Why risk it, they asked. The technology is proven. It's safer. Why put yourself through 9 months of discomfort when you don't have to? But Sarah had a simple answer. Because this is how humans are supposed to be born, not in a factory, not behind glass, in a mother's body, the way it's always been. And on August 12, 2094, Sarah Chen became the last. Now, you might be thinking, what's the problem? Isn't this good? Safer births, healthier babies, no maternal mortality. And on paper, you'd be right. Infant mortality, nearly zero. Maternal deaths, eliminated. Birth defects, reduced by 73%. These are objectively incredible achievements. But here's where it gets complicated. Because we didn't just replace pregnancy. We removed something fundamental to the human experience. For all of human history, pregnancy was the ultimate shared experience. A woman carried life inside her body, felt the first kick, endured morning sickness, cravings, discomfort, went through labor, pain that philosophers and poets have tried to describe for millennia. It was difficult, dangerous, sometimes tragic, but it was also irreplaceably human. Now, parents visit a clinic once a week, look through glass at a fetus floating in synthetic fluid, receive data readouts about development milestones, and then they go home. Let me describe what this looks like. It's Tuesday afternoon. A couple walks into a Just a Life clinic, one of thousands operating worldwide. The facility looks more like an Apple store than a hospital. Clean white surfaces, minimalist design, soft ambient music. They check in with a receptionist who smiles professionally and directs them to chamber 247. They walk down a hallway lined with transparent cylinders, each containing a developing fetus at various stages. Week 12, week 20, week 35. They reach their chamber. Inside, their baby, 28 weeks along, floats peacefully in blue-tinted fluid. The baby's eyes are closed. Small movements. A hand drifts past its face. A screen beside the chamber displays everything. Heart rate, 142 BPM. Oxygen saturation, 98%. Growth percentile, 67th. Neural development, optimal. Projected birth date, November 3rd, 2095. The mother places her hand on the glass. The baby doesn't respond. Can't feel the touch through 6 inches of transparent polymer. They stay for 20 minutes. Take some photos. The father jokes that the baby has his nose. Then they leave. Back to work. Back to their lives. The baby continues floating, monitored by algorithms, fed by machines, growing in perfect isolation. The baby is safe, monitored, optimized, but the parents never feel a move inside them, never have that biological bond formed over 9 months of shared existence, never experience the flood of hormones that prime a parent for attachment. It's like the difference between cooking a meal and ordering delivery. You get the same end result, but something in the process, something intangible, is lost. If this trade-off makes you uncomfortable, if you're wondering what else we might optimize away in the future, leave a like. It helps this channel reach people who still think about the cost of progress. But the implications go deeper. By 2095, an entire generation had grown up knowing they were gestated in artificial wombs. They'd seen the videos, transparent chambers, floating peacefully in blue liquid. Clinical, controlled, perfect. Psychologists began noticing something. These children scored slightly lower on empathy assessments, had more difficulty forming deep emotional bonds, showed less physical affection. Nothing catastrophic, nothing obvious, just a slight coldness, a clinical distance. Dr. Marcus Webb, a child psychologist in Toronto, documented this in a 2098 study. He interviewed 500 children, half born naturally before 2094, half gestated artificially after. The naturally born children, when asked, "What does your mom mean to you?" gave answers like, "She's the person who was there before I even knew what there was. She carried me. We were connected. I came from her." The artificially gestated children said things like, "She's my primary caregiver. She made the choice to have me. She visited me every week during gestation. Same love, same families. But the language, the fundamental understanding of connection, was different, as if being born from glass and steel and perfect data readouts had made them a little less warm-blooded. In 2099, a controversial book was published, The Last Mammal by anthropologist Dr. James Okonkwo. His thesis was provocative. Humans had fundamentally changed what it meant to be mammalian. Mammals, by definition, are characterized by live birth and nursing. But in 2094, we'd eliminated the first. Breastfeeding had already been declining for decades. Formula was easier, more measured, more controlled. Dr. Okonkwo argued we were becoming something new, something post-mammalian, something more efficient, but less connected to the biological chains that had defined us for 200 million years of mammalian evolution. The book was banned in 14 countries, called sensationalist, called alarmist, but it asked a question no one could quite answer. If we're no longer defined by birth and nursing, what defines us as human? Let me tell you about Dr. Helena Kovač. She's 73 years old in 2095, which means she's one of the last people alive who was born naturally. And she's also one of the lead developers of artificial womb technology. The irony isn't lost on her. In an interview, she was asked, "Do you regret what you created?" She paused for a long time before answering. "I saved lives, tens of millions of lives, and I'm proud of that. But when I hold my grandchildren, children who were born from machines I designed, I feel them searching for something they don't know they're missing. We gave them safety, but we took away mystery. We gave them data, but we took away intuition. We optimized birth, but we sterilized it." She continued, "My granddaughter asked me once what it was like to be pregnant. I tried to explain. The feeling of a baby moving inside you, the strange intimacy of sharing your body, the way your entire being reorganizes itself around this life you're carrying." She listened politely, but I could see in her eyes she couldn't really understand. It was like trying to explain color to someone who's only ever seen in black and white. Dr. Kovač put into words what many were feeling, but couldn't articulate. The generation born after 2094 is the healthiest in human history, strongest, smartest, most genetically optimized. But they're also the first generation who never knew what it meant to be carried. For 300,000 years, humans began life in darkness, hearing a heartbeat, feeling movement, sharing blood and oxygen and hormones with another human being. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and dangerous and painful. But it was also the deepest physical connection two humans could have. And here's what's profound. We don't know what we lost by removing it. We can't measure it, can't quantify it in a study, can't capture it in data. How do you measure the bond formed when a mother's stress hormones flood into her fetus, teaching it about the world outside? How do you quantify the experience of labor, pain that transforms a woman into a mother? How do you graph the moment a newborn, seconds old, recognizes a heartbeat it heard for 9 months? You can't. And in 2094, we stopped trying. There's a support group that formed in 2096. It's small, unofficial. They call themselves the Last Mothers, women who gave birth naturally in the final years before it became extinct. They meet monthly in a community center in Portland, share stories, share grief for something the rest of the world considers progress. One woman, Maria Santos, described her experience. I gave birth in 2091. Natural, unmedicated. 22 hours of labor. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But when they placed my son on my chest, still covered in vernix, still connected by the umbilical cord, I understood something that can't be taught. That my body had made him. That we'd been a single organism, and now we were two. That's a kind of knowing that goes deeper than thought. She paused, emotional. My daughter-in-law just had a baby. Well, she didn't have it. She picked it up from the clinic. Beautiful, healthy baby boy. Perfect in every way. But when I saw her hold him for the first time, there was no recognition. He was a stranger she watched on screen for 9 months. Not someone she'd carried. Not someone she felt hiccup at 3 a.m. Just a very important stranger. If you're watching this and feeling something you can't quite name, if you're wondering what other irreplaceable parts of being human we might trade away for safety and efficiency, subscribe, because we're going to keep exploring these futures, the ones that make us better and the ones that make us less. By 2100, there are proposals to optimize even further. Reduce gestation time from 9 months to 6. Edit genes for intelligence, athleticism, beauty. Remove all randomness, all chance, all humanity. Some companies are already offering premium gestation packages, enhanced nutrition protocols, carefully curated music and voices played into the womb to stimulate development, light therapy to establish optimal circadian rhythms before birth. And everyone says it's progress. Maybe it is. But Sarah Chen, holding her daughter on August 12, 2094, she knew she'd experienced something no one ever would again. In the decades that followed, humanity became healthier, safer, more efficient. Maternal mortality became a footnote in history textbooks. Birth defects nearly eliminated. Every child born optimized, monitored, perfect. But something else became a footnote too. The experience of pregnancy. The feeling of life growing inside you. The transformation of pain into love. The mystery of birth. They became relics, curiosities, things people in museums looked at and said, I can't believe they used to do it that way. In 2115, the Museum of Human Development opened in Geneva. It had an entire wing dedicated to natural reproduction. Visitors could see ancient ultrasound images, maternity clothes from the 2070s, a recreation of a delivery room from 2090. The most popular exhibit was an interactive experience called 9 Months, where visitors wore a weighted vest that simulated pregnancy at different stages. Most people took it off after 20 minutes. How did they do this for 9 months? Became a common comment in the guest book. There was a video exhibit featuring interviews with women who'd given birth naturally, elderly women by then, some in their 90s, recounting their experiences. Visitors watched with the same fascination. They might watch videos of people living without electricity or indoor plumbing. And technically, they're right. The old way was dangerous. The old way killed people. The old way was inefficient and painful and unpredictable. But the old way was also human. And that's the question that haunts the future we're building. How much of our humanity are we willing to optimize away? We fix pregnancy. Next, we'll fix aging. Then death. Then consciousness itself. And at each step, we'll gain something incredible and lose something irreplaceable. Sarah Chen lived to be 92. Her daughter, the last naturally born human, had children of her own, all gestated artificially. 3 of them, each one picked up from a clinic at exactly 40 weeks, perfectly healthy, statistically optimized. Sarah loved them. Of course she loved them. But she noticed things. They were brilliant children. Top of their classes, athletic, well-adjusted by every measure. But they hugged differently, less urgently, less needfully. When they got hurt, they sought comfort in data. The pain will pass in approximately 10 minutes, rather than in physical touch. They formed friendships easily, but seemed puzzled by the concept of missing someone. We can video chat anytime. They'd say, not understanding the ache of physical absence. Sarah's daughter noticed it too. They're perfect, Mom, she said once. Everything I wanted. But sometimes I wonder if they're missing something I don't have a vocabulary to describe. In 2140, on her deathbed, Sarah was asked what she remembered most about that August night in 2094. She said, "I remember the pain. God, the pain was unbelievable. But I also remember the first breath she took. I had carried her, felt every kick, every hiccup. She wasn't data on a screen. She was part of me, and I was part of her. When they placed her on my chest, her eyes opened, and she looked at me, and I swear she knew me, not because of genetics, because we'd already spent 9 months together. No machine will ever replicate that." Someone asked her if she thought humanity had made the right choice. She was quiet for a long time. "We made the safe choice," she finally said. "The logical choice. The choice that saved lives. But I'm not sure right is the same as safe. We traded mystery for certainty, connection for perfection. And I don't know if we understood what we were trading until it was gone." Sarah Chen died the next day. The last person who remembered what it meant to be born from another human. The last person who carried that ancient mammalian knowledge in her body. And with her death, something truly ended, not just the practice of natural birth that had ended decades earlier, but the living memory of it, the embodied understanding of what it meant. After 2140, pregnancy became purely historical, theoretical, something studied in textbooks and anthropology courses, alongside other obsolete human practices. The last mother was gone, and the world was safer for it. But as Dr. Kovač had said, safer isn't always the same as better. If this future makes you think about the choices we're making today, about what we're willing to trade for safety, for efficiency, for perfection, share this video. Because the future doesn't happen to us. It happens because of us. And every choice we make today shapes what tomorrow looks like. The technology for artificial wombs already exists in experimental form. Right now, in laboratories around the world, it's being tested, refined, improved. The question isn't if this future will arrive. The question is, when it does, will we understand what we're choosing? Will we count the cost? Or will we, like so many generations before us, optimize something away and only realize what we lost when it's too late to get it back?